November 3rd, 1917, 04:23 hours. No Man's Land, Passchendaele Ridge, Belgium. Corporal James Whitmore lies in a shell crater filled with 3 feet of freezing mud. His right leg is shattered below the knee, shrapnel from a German 77mm round that killed the 2 men beside him. He's been here 6 hours. The stretcher bearers can't reach him. Machine gun fire sweeps anything that moves above ground level. He's stopped screaming. He's simply waiting to die. Then he hears it. Not boots, hooves. Through the pre-dawn darkness, a horse appears. A bay mare, 14 hands high, wearing a modified pack saddle. No rider. She picks her way between craters with an almost surgical precision, guided by a handler crouched 200 yards behind the line. Around her barrel, a canvas stretcher rig swings empty. Her name is Rosie. She cost the British Army $1. Between 1914 and 1918, Britain purchased more than 10,000 horses from American dealers at exactly $1 per animal. Not £1 sterling, $1 American dollar. Approximately 4 shillings in contemporary British currency. The price seems absurd until you understand what Britain was actually buying. These weren't cavalry mounts or artillery horses. They were older animals, aged 8 to 15 years, considered past their prime for regular military service. Many had minor defects, slightly crooked legs, healed injuries, temperamental personalities. American dealers were happy to sell them. British cavalry officers initially refused to accept them, but Lieutenant Colonel John Moore of the Royal Army Medical Corps saw something others missed. These horses had something younger, stronger animals lacked: experience. They'd worked on farms, hauled freight, navigated difficult terrain. Most critically, they didn't panic easily. Moore was building an ambulance service for the Western Front, and he needed horses that could function in hell. The horses arrived at a converted estate outside Southampton in batches of 500. Moore's team had 8 weeks to transform farm animals into medical evacuation units. The training was brutal by design. Handlers fired rifles near the horses' heads, set off explosives in adjacent fields, played recordings of artillery barrages at increasing volumes. They walked the horses through smoke, through fire, through fields deliberately flooded to simulate Flanders mud. Most importantly, they trained the horses to work without riders. This was the radical innovation. Traditional cavalry required riders, but riders drew fire. A riderless horse, moving low and fast, presented a target barely 3 feet high. Machine gunners often didn't waste ammunition on them. The horses learned to follow voice commands and hand signals from handlers positioned in covered positions. They learned to recognize stretcher bearers by silhouette. They learned to stand absolutely still while wounded men were loaded onto their backs. The washout rate was high. Perhaps 40% of horses failed training, too skittish, too stubborn, or simply too traumatized by the simulated combat. Those were sold to civilian transport services. The ones who passed became ghosts on the battlefield. By mid-1917, the Western Front had become a mathematical problem of death and extraction. A wounded man in no man's land had approximately a 12% chance of survival if he remained there overnight. If retrieved within 4 hours, time equals 3 milliseconds greater, then his survival rate increased to 68%. Traditional stretcher-bearer teams, 4 men carrying 1 wounded soldier, moved at perhaps half a mile per hour through contested ground. They were large, obvious targets. German doctrine explicitly called for firing on stretcher-bearers to demoralize enemy units. A horse ambulance moved at 3 miles per hour, presented 1/3 the target profile, could carry 2 wounded men instead of requiring 4 bearers for 1, and could be deployed multiple times per night without exhausting human resources. The mathematics were undeniable. 1 horse replaced 12 men and moved 6 times faster. More importantly, Horses didn't leave anyone behind. Stretcher-bearer teams made agonizing decisions about which wounded to attempt to retrieve. The horses simply went wherever they were directed. Into gas clouds, into artillery bombardments, into active kill zones. They didn't make moral calculations, they just worked. The Third Battle of Ypres, Passchendaele, represented the Horse Ambulance Service's greatest test. The battlefield was lunar. Constant shelling had destroyed all drainage, creating a landscape of overlapping shell craters filled with water and mud. Men who fell off duckboard paths drowned in the muck. Tanks became immobilized and sank. But horses could navigate it. Their 4 points of contact distributed weight more effectively than human boots or tank treads. Their instincts for safe footing, developed over thousands of years of evolution, proved superior to human judgment in the dark. They could detect solid ground beneath surface mud through sensitivity in their hooves. Between July and November 1917, the Horse Ambulance Service evacuated an estimated 47,000 wounded from forward positions at Passchendaele. For comparison, motorized ambulances, which bogged down in the mud and required hard surface roads, evacuated approximately 12,000 during the same period. The casualty rate among the horses was devastating. Approximately 30% died in service, from artillery fire, gas exposure, exhaustion, or simple accidents in the treacherous terrain. But their presence fundamentally changed the battlefield. Calculus. Soldiers knew that even if they fell in no man's land, there was a chance. That psychological factor alone may have saved as many lives as the physical evacuations. When the armistice was signed on November 11, 1918, approximately 6,200 of the original 10,000 American horses remained alive. They were, by military standards, worn-out equipment. Most were underweight, many carried shrapnel wounds, all showed signs of psychological trauma from years of shell fire. The British Army faced a choice: ship them home or destroy them in France. Lieutenant Colonel Moore, who had built the service, fought for repatriation. He argued these animals had earned retirement. The Army countered that shipping costs would exceed the horses' value. They'd been purchased for $1. They'd served their purpose. In the end, politics intervened. The British public had followed newspaper accounts of the Horse Ambulance Service throughout the war. When rumours spread that the horses might be destroyed, public outcry was immediate and fierce. Parliament received thousands of letters. The War Office, sensitive to public opinion in the war's aftermath, relented. The horses went home. Most were adopted by veterans who'd worked with them, purchased for exactly what Britain had paid, $1 each. Historians estimate that horse ambulance services evacuated between 80,000 and 120,000 wounded soldiers during World War I, men who would have died without rapid extraction from forward positions. For perspective, Britain deployed approximately 2,000 tanks during the entire war. Those tanks are credited with saving perhaps 30,000 lives through breakthrough operations that reduced casualty rates in otherwise suicidal infantry assaults. The horses cost less, saved more, and left no oil slicks in the Flanders mud. Yet tanks received monuments, museums, feature films. The horses received a brief mention in medical histories and a small plaque at the Imperial War Museum, installed in 1994, 76 years after the armistice. Perhaps this is because tanks represented the future: mechanized warfare, industrial power, technological progress. The horses represented something older, something that didn't fit the narrative of modern war. They were an improvisation, a desperate solution using obsolete equipment. But desperate solutions sometimes work better than grand strategies. November 3rd, 1917. 0547 hours. Corporal Whitmore is strapped to Rosie's back. He's barely conscious, hypothermic, drifting. The horse moves through the darkness with absolute certainty, following a path only she can sense. Behind the British line, a medical officer waits with morphine and hot tea. Whitmore will lose the leg below the knee, but he'll live to see his daughter born in 1919. He'll work as a postal clerk in Manchester for 37 years. He'll die in 1963 at age 71 in his own bed. He'll never forget the sound of hooves in the darkness, 10,000 horses, $1 each, an army's desperate gamble that discarded animals could save lives that tanks and tactics couldn't. They did.